Okay, so back in Shara Yichud of the Mittler Rebbe, Chapter 1, Part 2. I believe in our previous tape we were talking about the different dimensions of every concept. And we will do some review here. Let me just look inside. I'm using the copy of the book from kahatonline.com. Okay, so we'll do some review. Kihine Gimel Devarim. There are three things, really three aspects. Hu sheyesh b'kol davar muskal, that exist in every concept. And the name of those three aspects of every concept are omek, va'orech, v'rochev. The depth, the length, and the width. Those are the terms. What are their definition? Here we go. Harochev hu bechinat hesber hamuskal l'kol tzad b'pratim harbe. The width refers to the explanation of the concept to many different angles. Really, the translation of l'kol tzad is to every angle or to every side, with many details. Karochev hanahar. This is comparable to the width of a river, as opposed to velo dvarim kaviatan levad kanahar katzar. Not looking at a concept from one angle alone, the literal translation is velo dvarim kaviatan levad, not things as they are in and of themselves, which that would be comparable to a narrow river. Or like when you say someone's narrow-minded, what you mean is they're incapable, or more likely they refuse to view a concept from more than one angle. Okay, so a very broad understanding of some subject and a detailed understanding of some subject versus a very narrow, limited understanding of some subject. That's width. Va'orech, and the length, hu otzem iridas hawaskala lahalbish es muska b'mashalim shonim allahavio basagot hatinok katan chulom. The length refers to the profound descent of the concept in the expression of the concept in different analogies until it can be brought into the comprehension of a child, etc. And this is not necessarily just a child in years. It could be a child in a metaphoric sense, meaning a beginner in studying some subject. Like this could be us right now, starting off our studies of Chassidus with this book. What does it mean when the Mittler Rebbe speaks of the profound descent? So the expression of a concept in terms of an analogy which relates some facet of the concept to our daily experience, so we're more likely to understand it because we already have developed a framework for it, is considered a descent in the conceptual sense in relation to the essence of the concept. So for example, you notice here that the Mittler Rebbe started describing to us the different aspects of intellect in terms of rivers. So he's taking some concept and he's expressing that concept in terms we can relate to because they jive with our life experience. At one point in our life or another, we probably have seen rivers, we probably have felt rivers, we probably have experienced rivers and other bodies of water in different ways. So the Mittler Rebbe is giving us analogies that relate ideas to what we're already familiar with so we can grasp those ideas. Then once we understand those ideas as they're expressed concretely, we can work to abstract the ideas and try to isolate the points behind them that our teacher, in this case the Mittler Rebbe, wishes to convey to us. Okay, so this is the function of an analogy. It's to take some concept and quote-unquote bring it down to a level where people can appreciate it simply and clearly. This is comparable to another aspect of the river, namely, kenahar shaholich mitmashich laorech. It's like a river which goes and flows in length. Right? The fact that the direction of the water travels from up to down, this represents metaphorically the conceptual descent that the essence of the concept undergoes, or a facet of the essence of the concept undergoes, as it is expressed in terms of analogies. And the Mittler Rebbe gives a little parentheses here. We'll skip it for now, but the basic point is that you don't sacrifice the integrity of the concept you seek to express by expressing that concept in terms of an analogy. It's not like you have to give something up. But rather what you look at in the analogy is an increasingly particular concrete expression of the essence of some concept, or else you could say of a facet of some concept. And I think the latter is more accurate, of a facet of some concept. It's not like you're changing the concept. You're just expressing it in a very particular, concrete way. Okay, so we covered the width, right, all the different details, the different angles. We covered the length, the process of bringing down the point you want to convey through analogies and explanations. And then finally we've got left here the depth, ve'ha'omek, and the depth is hu ka'omek ha'nahar, like the depth of a river. Well, what do we want to notice about the depth of a river? Shemisham misrachiv, that from the depth it becomes widened. Uba'atzmoinu rachav klal, while it itself, the depth of the river itself, is not wide at all. Aval hu ikar etzam hanahar hanikra shtruyim, but it is the primary essence of the river, which is called the undercurrent. We see in parentheses hanikra shtruyim, which is called the undercurrent. Shehu ikar merutzas hilucho mimakoro, which represents the primary flow of water from its source, which in relation to the river would be the wellspring. Then, of course, there's the source of the wellspring too, which is the pocket of water in the earth, which is called an aquifer. We'll get more into that in a little bit. Umayim shal gabav begovo litzdadei ha'omek, and the water which is on top of and to the sides of the depth, tefelim elav, are secondary to it, she'enan rak bechinat hidgabrut hidpashtuto bilavad litzdadim barochav ubegova ubeorach hahiluchulu, insofar as they merely represent the aspect of the strength of its flow to the sides in width and in height and in length of the flow of the water, etc. In other words, the deeper the river, the wider and the longer, and the more shallow the depth of the river, the more narrow and the more short. So the width and the length of the river depend upon the depth of the river. And now the Mittler Rebbe will say that that was the analogy in terms of the analog, right, the point, what we're actually discussing here in terms of, again, to tie it back to the three aspects of the intellect. The truth is, the deeper an idea, the more angles you could view it from, the more details, in other words, the more width, and then also the more analogies will be required to concretely express the different facets of the idea, in other words, the more length. So if you have some deep concept like medicine, there could be a lot of details and a lot of explanations required. It could take years of study. In contrast, some very shallow concept like hopscotch or tic-tac-toe, there are only so many ways you could explain that, and it doesn't really require that many explanations to really grasp the point of that game. Okay. Kachomek hamuskal, so to the depth of the concept, to bechinas etzem nekudasa kamosha, who is the essential point of the concept as it is, like in its own right, v'nikra omek hamusag, and it is called the point of the concept. Right, the point you want to convey, the point of the explanations, let's say. Shekomash nispashit behezbera saga l'kol tzad barochav gadol b'kama pratim, that everything that spreads forth in terms of the explanation of the concept to all, to every angle, with much width and a number of details, v'kein la'orach botzam ha'yirida, and so too with regard to the length and the profound descent. In other words, that the concept undergoes by way of the explanations and analogies you use to explain it. V'gam b'chinat hagova l'maylo haskil mi'od l'maylo mimenu harbe, and also the height above it, to understand from it something much higher than it, kind of like in math. the more you understand a concept, the higher you can go, the more abstractly you can look at a subject. Basically, let's just skip the parentheses from here. I just want to say basically they're an expression of the depth. Hakol nimshach me'etzam omek nekudaso kamo shehu novea min hachachma hanikra ayin ukamo shekasu v'nahar yotze me'eden chulu. These dimensions of understanding are all an expression of the essence of the point. Okay, so again, the deeper the point, the more different angles you could look at it from, the more explanation is required to quote-unquote bring it down so people could understand it simply. As this point of understanding flows forth from insight, which will be discussed shortly, the faculty of insight, which metaphorically speaking, the faculty of insight is referred to as nothing, and the reason for that, I know you're probably wondering, what do we mean by the term nothing here? What we mean is not non-existence, and what we mean is not, outer space. What we mean by nothing is the abstract expression of the idea. Okay, so every idea transcends expression altogether, but when it is expressed in the intellect, it's expressed first in a general abstract way, in an intuitive fashion. That's like Chachma, the power of insight, and it's expressed primarily in the right hemisphere of the brain. And then the details embedded in it are unpacked through the process of analysis, right? Through learning, through study. And that would be the analytic mind and the power of understanding expressed primarily in the left hemisphere of the brain. That's the faculty of Bina that we'd be referring to. And as it is written, and a wellspring, Vinahar, and a river went forth from Eden, etc. And the word for Eden, I know usually when people think Eden, they think of the Garden of Eden. And yes, that verse is a verse from the book of Genesis describing a river that was flowing forth from the Garden of Eden. But additionally, the word Eden, or really Eden, is related to pleasure. And we'll learn later in the book that the pleasure in and desire for understanding something is really what activates our God-given power to conceive ideas and gives rise to an insight into the subject we're studying, which is then developed in the analytic mind. So there's kind of a connection there between the faculty of pleasure, insight, and understanding. And again, we'll talk more about that in depth and later in the book. I think it's like in the 20 chapters. Okay, again, so just to summarize our lesson today, 3 aspects of the intellect, and that would be the width, the length, and the depth. The width is looking at all the details, all the different angles you can view a concept from. The length is the analogies and explanations used to concretely express the concept. And then the depth is the essential point of the concept that, let's say, you mean to convey to your friend, your student, maybe yourself in your own studies. And that's that. We will continue on in the next class. Let's see what the next couple lines talk about. Okay, we're going to tie our discussion here back to the 2 types of study we mentioned earlier, which are Girsa, surface study, or cursory study. Just trying to cover ground basically is the point of that method of study, or get a general overview of some topic. We're going to again contrast that a little bit with Iyun, or analytic, detailed study. And then talk a bit about the role of concentration, because we know that there are really 3 aspects of the mind, which are insight, understanding, and concentration. Until now, we were talking mostly about the power of understanding, a little bit here about the power of insight, but we also want to understand the role that the power of concentration plays together with these faculties of insight and understanding. More then, thank you for joining.